This is a video about identifying outcome predictors in Motif. We're working with the Motiflix dataset, which includes the kind of events you'd see with a video streaming service. A lot of the videos so far have dealt with sequences in aggregate or key moments in sequences. This one's going to be a little bit different. We're looking for the things inside a sequence that predict an outcome we're interested in. And so the first thing we're going to do is sessionize the data because that's the unit of analysis we're interested in. And I'm going to hit slash and type sessionize, and that'll give me the copilot suggestion. And so far we've been working with 1 hour between sessions, so I'll change it to that. Okay, so we've got this unit of analysis of session. The outcome we're interested in is watch end. This feels stronger than watch start, where someone could start a lot of videos they're not interested in. Watch end means they got to the very end. So this is the one we want to focus on today. If I shrink the prefix, we'll see all the cases where it matched. There's a few where it didn't. And we're going to do something, we're going to use the table today, which is not a place we've been hanging out a lot. So that'll be great to learn about. So by default, the table your table may group by all the different paths. In this case, I'm grouping by none, and the metric I'm using is a count star. So I'm seeing that in this data set there are about 4.28 million sessions. I want to figure out the number of watch starts on average. So I'm going to set a new variable called watched, which I'm going to use the length of watch end. Now, the length of an event is just going to be 1 or 0 if it exists. So I'm basically adding to the sequence something that's a 1 if the user did get to watch end, or a 0 if they didn't. And now I can add a metric that basically takes that watch variable and takes the mean of it. And so I can see that of my 4.29 million sessions, on average about 69.4 included a watch end. I actually want to store that baseline rate in my sequence, and I'll show you why in a second. So this is 0.694 is my baseline watch rate. Now, when we think about kind of analyzing the outcome and the things that are contribute to it, we really want to know the marginal contribution. We want to know, the lift or the gain that something's going to deliver. So for any given user, I can take their marginal gain, and that can be equal to whether or not they watched minus that baseline watch rate. So baseline watch rate. Great. So now I have a marginal gain, which is for any given session, whether the lift it had over the baseline. And so if I go here and I have my average, I'm going to add the sum of my marginal gain. So I'm going to change my aggregation to sum. And then we should see that this is about 0. Okay, so my watch rate, 0.689. The marginal gain across sessions should be close to 0. Now remember, we want Motif to be like super responsive. And so we're doing some sampling under the hood. And we've sampled this data set to 5% to make it really fast to work with. So this is, close to 0 basically for our purposes. If we want, we can hit the query more button, and that'll run through all 273,000 sequences, all 4.3 million sessions generated from that, and get us the exact numbers. That's going to take about a minute every time I hit that button, so I'm not going to do it right now, but maybe at the end we can do that to get kind of more precise numbers. Okay, so now I understand for any given session the kind of lift over the baseline that session has. So now I'm going to start using this group by to look at the things that are of interest. So by default, we have paths in here, and so those are all the different paths. We could cap this at, let's say, paths of length 3, and then we'll show you the top 25 of those. Now I can sort by count, which will give me the most common paths. So home page, search page, followed by search result is the most common. I could sort by the watch rate that I created. These are the paths that result in the highest number of watch ends. So home page to top movies to movie page results in a lot of watch ends. And then the marginal gain will kind of show me the impact of that. So if something happens a lot, and it has a little bit of lift, then that might result in a large marginal gain. Or if something has a lot of watches but is kind of small, like this, maybe the marginal gain will also be high. So this is a way to kind of combine these two statistics. So the highest marginal gain is from search and search results, followed by a homepage click to movie page, and so on. Now, these are just the first 3 steps in the sequence. It's not really telling me kind of a deep amount from the sequence. One of the things I want to do to make sure I'm kind of keeping this analysis clean is I'm going to replace the suffix, so that's everything after the watch end, with null. And that'll make sure that, for example, if watch end was in the middle of this sequence, I'm not considering the events that happened after it. Now, again, I'm looking at sequences. It might be logical here to think about looking at individual events. So to do that, I'm going to match split, and I'm going to use a tag called A, which just references any event, and then open parentheses, which will basically split on every single event. Now when I run this query, all my paths are of length 1. If I go to my examples, you'll see I've basically split every sequence into a single event. And so in my table, I'm getting the events that are, if I sort by count, the most common. So watch heartbeat 51.6 million times. I can look at the ones that drive the most watch. So watch end is in there, unsurprisingly. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So I'll just replace, I can do matched here because I know that was the event I matched on. So I'm going to replace matched with null. And that should pluck off watch end. Okay, so now watch heartbeat, watch pause, watch start. These are the events, the single events most commonly associated with a user getting to watch end. Now, I look at this marginal gain, which is kind of like the things I'm most interested in, and I can see that the heartbeat is very large, 54 million. Now, the heartbeat is something that we get while a video is playing on a regular interval to tell us that the user is still there and still watching. So I don't really want every heartbeat. I only want one heartbeat to understand this event. So now I need to filter out these kind of multiple heartbeats in there. So when I do my match split, I can add an if statement here. And I'm going to say basically if a.name, so if the event name is not in prefix dot name. And so this is basically saying when you look at an event, look at all the events before it and look at their names. And if this name's not in it, then we're going to add it to the sequence. I'm going to run over to examples where it'll run this automatically. And you'll see this at work. So, for example, here's my heartbeat. And then there were a bunch of heartbeats after it that just basically didn't get included in the session. Or didn't even get it split down into events because they were repeated. So that's exactly what we're looking for. All right, let's go back over to the table and look at our summary statistics. Okay, so now count is now, we're looking at multiple sequences. So let's go back to our A, the thing we split on. And we can see that homepage is now the most common and heartbeat is dropped. And that makes a lot more sense because homepage is something that happens about once per session. If we look at the mean, so the thing most commonly associated with watching, we can see pausing. Now that's interesting. When someone pauses, maybe that's a sign that even when they're interrupted, they don't want to miss anything. So that's associated with getting to the end of the movie, so watch end. Heartbeat, a little bit less. So just, continuing to be there is not as strong a predictor as you'll get to the end as a pause. And then watch start. Starting a video is a predictor of ending it. And it's not as strong as a heartbeat, which means you got some way into the video. Now, if I look at marginal gain, these are the things that have both high volume and a high rate. And so they're the things that I might want to think about driving, the behaviors that are strongly associated with my outcome that I want to really drive. So movie page is interesting here. That means when someone looks at the kind of home card for a movie, they're going to be more likely to end it. to get to the end of a movie. So maybe I'm looking at paths where someone doesn't get to a movie page, but does watch the movie. Search, click. So if you search and you find something and you click, that's a pretty good sign that you're going to get to the end, and so on. So I've got some interesting things here. It's kind of difficult to think about a single event and how it's driving a behavior. And that's probably something you can do in a pretty straightforward way in other platforms. So now I want to get to some real interesting differentiators. So I want to add the preceding event to every event. So this is going to start to get to every pairwise combination of events that I'm seeing. And that'll get to these kind of like, what do they call it? Bigrams in natural language processing. These things that kind of begin to have more meaning than a single event. So how will I do that? So I'm going to start with my Copilot and just say, add a dimension to every event with the name of the event before it. All right, let's see how my natural language worked here. Okay, so for every event, starting with the second event, create something called previous event name and set it to the name of the event. And this is a sequence for every event except for the last one. So we basically take an array which is like everything except for the last event, and then we assign it to all of the events starting with the second event. So we just like shifted up, which that seems about right. And then I'm going to set the very first event needs one of these two. So I'm going to set sequence 0. I'm going to give this a value of base. Okay. Just to kind of suggest baseline. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to examples and see the impact of this. Well, first I need to do it before I do my match split, so I'm operating in the full sequences and not the splits. So I'm going to remove my match split for now so we can look at this. So on home page, which is the second event in this user sequence, I see previous event name sign up. On sign up, I see base. Great. Now, I want to actually make this a little bit more complicated. I want to, instead of previous event name, I'm going to say, I'm going to call this just like my pair. And I'm going to set it to not only event before, but my current name as well. So we're going to actually make a string here. And we're going to, so that'll use concat. And I'm going to concat this with our traditional kind of like in-between events operator. And then seq of 1 : dot name. Okay, so I made this a little bit more complicated. I took the name of the event preceding and the name of the event following, and I made this kind of like array of combined names, and I'm going to assign that. Let's see how that works. So under homepage, great, now I have sign up followed by homepage. And under homepage, I have base. If it's the first event, it's base. If it's the second, it's the third event. I get the pairwise version. Okay, pretty cool. So now I'm going to add back my match split. Which will split on all these events. I'm going to continue to do my dedupe. So if a dot, in this case, I'm going to dedupe on that pair. Whoops, I didn't change this to pair, which I need to do. Okay, so if a dot pair is not in prefix dot pair. Okay, so now I'm getting for this has a prefix, or this has a pair of watch heartbeat to watch heartbeat. This has the same one, so it's not being included, as you can see, but all of these are because they must be unique. Great, so now I have all these unique pairwise values. I'm going to go back to my table. And instead of grouping by that, I want to group by the pair, but I need to move that pair onto the full sequence. So So I'm going to create a new value on the sequence, and I'm going to call it underscore underscore path. And I'll show you why I use that in a second. So I'm going to give that a.pair. So now I'm taking basically the value off of my event, and I'm assigning it to the whole sequence. And you saw me do this before when I added this watch value. But basically, sometimes we need to take something out of an event dimension and put it on the whole sequence dimension to access it in our analysis. Okay, so now when I go over here, I'm going to run this query. And now in my group by, I should be able to see that underscore underscore path. Now I named it with that special name because that's actually a reserved name, that when you put something in that, it'll treat it like a sequence. Now I happen to use the standard motif syntax here with the greater than between events. And so motif can kind of see what we did there and say, oh, you made a sequence. And I'll parse that into this kind of pretty sequence logic. If I just called this, my path and run it, and then I group by on my path, it'll be there. It'll just be there as a string, right? So there's event, greater than, second event. So if I want that kind of pretty motif, visualization, I can use that reserved word underscore underscore path. And now I'll group by that. Okay, so now just like we were looking at single events, we're now looking at our sort of pairwise combinations. We've deduped already, just like we did with the single events. At the top, you see baseline. So this is basically every sequence. The mean here should be very close to our baseline watch rate of 694. Again, if I hit query more and got to an exact value, instead of the sampled value, it would probably be closer, if not the same as our baseline. And the same with the marginal gain, should be close to 0 here, but because we're sampling, it's just off of 0. So I'm going to sort by this watch rate, and I'm going to see the pairwise combinations that are most commonly associated with a watch. And so if I see a heartbeat, meaning someone started it and got some ways in and then paused it, that's strongly associated with ending. So just like we saw before, if you're pausing something, it means you don't want to miss it maybe, and you walk away, and so that means you're glued to it and you're likely to come back to it. Watch pause followed by watch start. That's interesting. I don't know what that means. Watch heartbeat repeated. Oh, trailer end followed by watch start. Okay, so if you watch the trailer and then you start it, that is highly associated with completing it. So now we're starting to get to real interesting outcome predictors. So getting someone to watch a trailer is going to drive the watch in behavior we're interested in seeing. But, right now, there aren't a lot of those, so the marginal gain of this behavior is lower. So this is a case where by increasing this behavior, we're going to see a bigger lift because we come through this sort of like high watch rate percentage. I'm going to sort by marginal gain now and see what I see in that column. So the biggest lift that we're getting in terms of watch ends come from the heartbeats, start followed by heartbeat, movie page followed by watch start, search results, search click. So a successful search result is very strong in terms of driving our watch ends. Maybe we want to look at unsuccessful searches and see where that comes from. And then search click getting to movie page, also very strong. Okay, so these are starting to make a lot of sense. Okay, let's look at some of the things on the bottom. So the things that are maybe drawing away from searches or drawing away from watch ends. So home page followed by search page. So if you're landing and going right to search, it's not really driving watch ends. If you get to search results and then you go back to search, so maybe you're researching something, that'd be pretty bad. And if you movie page back to home page, so you looked at a potential movie and then you went back to the home page, those are negatively associated with a watch end. So these are some behaviors that maybe you want to look at, how we can make sure people don't feel like they need to search because they don't need to go right to the search page. They're finding the thing that they would expect on the home page rather than having to search. Obviously, looking at search results and making sure we have some relevant answers here. And then on the high end, we can see the things that are doing well. If we sort by watch, we can kind of see maybe areas for opportunity where there's a low count of something but a high watch behavior. And we identified trailer end followed by watch start as maybe an area of opportunity. If people would watch a bunch of trailers, maybe they'd find something they want to watch, or if we can convince them to watch a trailer on something that is of marginal interest, maybe they're more likely to make it end. We kind of see this in Netflix right now, where that you see auto starting of trailers for things to maybe get this behavior, right? Is people are experiencing a little bit of the movie in order to drive that ultimate watch end experience. Okay, I hope that was really helpful. Let's review what we did. So we sessionized as usual. We matched on our key event. We pulled it forward as kind of an outcome 1 or 0 for the user. We stored the baseline watch rate on every user's record just so we could use it in a calculation. And that allowed us to calculate the marginal gain from every particular kind of user behavior pattern we were looking at. And that just made these numbers more realistic by removing the baseline rate. We took out the suffix, basically things that happened after the watch end in a session, and we got rid of the watch end because we didn't need it in the analysis. And then this was some code that we used to take pairwise events and put them onto a single event so that we can use that in our analysis. And then we did a match split at the end to basically break all of our single events into or break our sequences into single events, and then use the pair information that we'd stored on that event for our analysis. And we made sure that we removed duplicates by looking at the prefix to see if we'd already seen that particular value before. And then we even learned about this reserved word underscore path, where we could basically store sequence text in there, and we would automatically see it visualized pretty. And we used the table view. We looked at a number of different metrics that we added here, and we used the group by to look at different patterns. And that led us to some interesting outcome predictors.